Before we get started today, I do want to point out one thing. In the group, we have been getting an awful lot of what appear to be fake account requests, which has been kind of slowing down the approval process. So if you've got people who are trying to join the group, or if you are a new group member yourself, first of all, welcome. And secondly, I apologize, it's taken a little bit longer to get people approved than it usually does and than I would like. In addition, because people are getting a little bit more sophisticated, it is more and more possible that people are sliding through fake accounts that will only become clear once they start posting weird stuff or paid links or that sort of thing. So if you do come across anything like that in the group, please let me know right away, tag me in the post, and I'll get it taken care of as soon as possible. So with that, today we're going to be talking about exercise and a couple different aspects of that, why to do it, how to do it, things to look out for, and all that kind of fun stuff. We've found that it's very easy with lung disease that when you get the diagnosis of any kind of chronic lung disease, it's very easy to kind of sit down on the couch and say, well, I can't breathe anyway. I'm just going to chill out here, and I don't want to exert myself because I don't like being short of breath, and I don't like this. I don't like have to huff and puff. I have to huff and puff as too much as it is on a regular day. I don't want to have to do that while I'm exercising. And of course, we in the U.S. Tend to not get too much or not get enough exercise to begin with. And so, of course, when we have a chronic disease on top of that, that tends to go down even more. But there's actually a lot of benefit to exercising, particularly when we talk about COPD and chronic lung disease. First and foremost, many of you know that I've had a struggle with weight my whole life. Exercise can help you maintain your weight. It's been a key part of my weight loss plan and my weight maintenance plan. And a lot of you are kind of in the same boat where you might have to lose some weight or even add some muscle mass, and exercise can definitely help you do that. We particularly like to build up the muscles in the upper body, because these are what helps move the lungs and the diaphragm, and we call these some of these the accessory muscles of breathing, because your primary muscle is your diaphragm. But we use these accessory muscles to kind of compensate for the diaphragm, which can get flattened and weakened. But we can breathe a lot easier when we build up these muscles up here. And it's not just exactly the chest muscles, it's your chest muscles, it's your shoulder muscles, it's your neck muscles. All of these work in concert to move your chest, move your thoracic cavity, which is this part of your body, in and out, and help you breathe a little bit better. So we like to build that stuff up. It does tend to improve your symptoms to some degree also. You know, again, you have less shortness of breath because you're able to more efficiently move your body. Your muscles are often, and your organs are often more able to more efficiently use oxygen, which kind of cuts down on your oxygen demand and can relieve your shortness of breath a little bit. It helps get you in shape, so your fatigue goes down a little bit. A lot of those kind of benefits to this it can improve a lot of your those comorbid conditions we've talked about previously. Exercise can help diabetes. Exercise can certainly help a lot of the cardiac issues like blood pressure, high blood pressure, and that sort of thing. It can oftentimes improve your state of mind and your cognition, your rate of thinking, all that kind of fun stuff. And also an important consideration is that it can help you sleep. I know I usually sleep a little bit better when I get enough exercise, and when I don't get enough exercise, I often don't get tired soon enough, and then I go to bed too late, and I have to get up early, and I don't sleep very well. So exercise really helps with just about every part of your quality of life, and so it's important to focus on that. The flip side, of course, is when you don't exercise, you lose a lot of that stuff. You lose your strength, you lose your endurance, and that leads your symptoms to kind of increase, and that can lead to kind of this vicious downward spiral where your symptoms get worse, and so you withdraw even more, and you kind of get isolated and depressed, and then so you withdraw even more, and you sit on the couch and you don't exercise, and you start gaining weight, and you withdraw because you're short of breath all the time, and you just kind of circle all the way down until you kind of flush everything away. And we certainly don't want that to happen to any of you, or to anybody really in particular. So that's why exercise is kind of the key to the whole thing. And of course we have this wonderful thing called pulmonary rehabilitation that we can send a lot of people to to get that to get a very good, high quality monitored exercise where you work with a couple of different clinicians during the course of your sessions, and you learn your heart rate is monitored, your oxygen level is monitored. You can kind of be pushed to a safe physiological limit and understand where your limitations are and where things should be and how you should feel when you're exercising and all that kind of fun stuff. Unfortunately, pulmonary rehab also has a lot of restrictions. Health payers, the health insurance companies, Medicare, they often don't like to reimburse for that kind of thing unless you hit very certain conditions. And of course, those are still based on the old, I'll call it relatively old style of determining your severity by spirometry. We've talked a lot about that in the past, about how nowadays we're trying to do things based on your symptom burden, but unfortunately a lot of those classifications are still based on spirometry, which doesn't necessarily tie into how you feel. And so we see people who could really benefit from pulmonary rehab not having access to it because their insurance won't pay for it, Medicare won't pay for it, and they can't afford the copays on their own, and so they lose out on this pulmonary rehab and they think there's no way to exercise. In addition, we see a lot of people who might otherwise qualify for pulmonary rehab who are stuck in places where they don't have a very good program or any program at all. A lot of these places have had to cut back their services or close altogether because of funding cuts and that sort of thing. And so we really see too much restriction on access to pulmonary rehab, and that's something we're hoping to address in the next few years. But the fact of the matter is, while pulmonary rehab is incredibly helpful, and by no means should anybody think that I'm trying to minimize that or anything like that, you don't absolutely need pulmonary rehab in order to get decent exercise at home. Jim Nelson, I know he's on the webcast today. You've heard me talk about him a lot, probably to the point where you're tired of hearing about him. He always makes a point to talk about in his presentations when he was first diagnosed with COPD, he went out and bought a treadmill right away and ended up burning out, I think it was 5 treadmills over the course of his disease up until his transplant. And he still keeps very active today. Russell Winwood from Australia is about to run the London Marathon coming up here soon. I'm not 100% sure if he ever did pulmonary rehab, but of course that's also a thing that's time limited after a while. You have to be able to make sure you do those things on your own. You can go out and you can get a treadmill, but even basic treadmills can often cost a lot of money. You can often find them on things like Craigslist, get them used. Sometimes maybe you might have a local gym that's going out of business or turning over their equipment. You might be able to get a good price on one. Something like that can be very helpful. But there's also a lot of stuff that you can do just kind of on your own without any kind of special equipment, without any kind of cost expenditure or anything like that. Walking around the block is a good thing. Walking in place, I'll tell you, after I had my surgery, my abdominal surgery, they want you to get up and move around right away for a lot of reasons. Again, exercise is a key component to this stuff. They also want to make sure, when they're doing abdominal surgery, they tend to blow like carbon dioxide in there to kind of inflate and make more room for the surgical tools and all that stuff. And they want all that stuff to get out too. And the best way to do that is through exercise, getting up, moving around. It kind of works everything out through your systems. One thing that I did a lot was walking in place. I wanted to get my steps in. I was, and Bonnie can attest to this probably, I was a little bit more motivated than I am lately. Bonnie, my Fitbit was legit broken yesterday. That's why I didn't really participate. Please don't stop inviting me to the challenges, because I need some of that motivation too. But you can ask my wife about this. She would kind of make fun of me. I would get up during commercials and I would just kind of walk in place to get my steps in. A lot of times we've used a lot of videos. There's a lady out there named Leslie Sansone, does different intensity workouts, different intensity walking in place. There's a lot of, I'm going to back up for a moment, try to demonstrate some of this stuff. You do a lot of walking in place kind of things. You do a lot of step to the side kind of things. It's a variety workout, but it's also it also stimulates your activity level, and gets everything moving, but it's still varied enough where you can keep a good pace and all that. And it's very flexible to walk at your own pace. It's measured out, so if you match her pace, you do a mile in so many minutes, but we can adapt that, of course, to your individual exercise program. Now, before we get into too much more detail about exercising and stuff like that, it is important to mention that before you start any kind of exercise program like this, including pulmonary rehab, you do need to talk to your doctor. Everybody's case is a little bit different, and some people have certain medical conditions that are going to limit the particular types of activities they can do, or make certain requirements before you do exercise, or things to look out for exercise. Now, your doctor should be able to work with you and develop a good exercise plan, or be able to refer you to somebody who can, whether it's pulmonary rehab or whether it's more of a general rehabilitation where you can work with an exercise physiologist, a physical therapist type person, somebody like that who can work with them. If they're not willing to develop a good exercise program for you, you can work with this other specialist to try to get something that is designed for your use and that's going to work with your situation. But let's talk a little bit about some general exercises that we can do now. One of the things that I learned recently, I was fortunate enough to speak with Dr. Jean Ramez, who is a COPD, a person living with COPD, who has done a lot of research on her own. She's a research type person, and has done a lot of going out and finding her own way, and then also brings that back and does a lot of advocacy. And one of her best known, one of her mottos is medications and stuff let her breathe, but exercise lets her live. And so she's very much interested in what exercise, how exercise can work, especially in this population. And and of course, you're going to find a lot of varieties on this. You can go out, even in the various Facebook groups, you're going to learn a lot from a lot of different people. Everybody's going to have kind of their own spin on it. And that doesn't necessarily mean one person is right and one person is wrong, or you should follow this person over that person. You should take in whatever you can learn from any reliable source, and again, adapt it to what works in your situation. So what Jean said is often what she has found works well for a lot of people when they're starting, especially an unmonitored exercise program at home, outside of pulmonary rehab or outside of a specialized facility, is the first thing you need to do is work on building up your cardiovascular reserve, your heart and your breathing, basically, your heart and lungs. And what you're going to want to do is get to a point where you can do this cardio activity for about 30 minutes without stopping. That doesn't mean run a sprint for 30 minutes or jog for 30 minutes or anything like that. That just means keep moving without having to stop to catch your breath. And it's something that you're probably going to have to build up to. Not everybody's going to be able to just jump out there and start walking around the block at any kind of decent pace for 30 minutes. Most people, especially if they're starting an exercise program fresh, are going to have to walk for 5 minutes and then maybe stop and catch your breath for a minute and then push yourself a little bit more. And you're going to have to build up to it over the course of days or sometimes even weeks or possibly even longer. This is something that, you shouldn't just jump into. But start doing something where you can start building up your reserve and where you can start moving for a good half hour or so. And then you start doing resistance training. A lot of times people look at this as weights. There are also resistant bands and things like that. And we'll get into some of that stuff in a little bit more detail in just a minute. Before you do any kind of exercise, whether it is cardio or whether it is resistance, one of the most important things you're going to want to do is stretch. Stretching helps with your range of motion. It helps keep everything where it's supposed to be as you're moving around. Can help compensate for aches and pains and stuff like that. And if you have a bad joint, you're going to want to stretch that out and help compensate for that kind of thing. This is a lot of stuff that, and it's also an important first phase to your workout. The first phase of your workout is kind of a warm-up phase, and stretching can be a very good warm-up for that. Again, just like you're not going to jump into a program and go from 0 to 60 in a day or two, you're not going to start your daily exercise and go immediately into whatever you're going to want to do. That's a recipe for injuring yourself or throwing yourself into a red zone where you're going to have a lot of symptoms and you might need some medical attention. And of course, we don't want that either. So So start off by doing some fairly low speed, do some stretching, do some low speed stuff. And again, this isn't any kind of real fancy, you don't have to be like Jane Fonda workout or anything like that. This is stuff you can do in a chair. I mean, this is stretching. This is stretching. Shoulder shrugs can be stretching. These are all things that are fairly easy to do, that you can do standing up, you can do in a chair depending on where you're at with your mobility and all that stuff. Things that anybody can do. Again, you don't have to go to any kind of special rehab or anything like that to get this done. So you start out by stretching, and you can do the cardio stuff, and we talked about that briefly. Again, this is a thing you can go to a gym for. There are gyms that are relatively inexpensive. YMCAs, if you have one in your area, which most people do, often will have payment plans or scholarship kind of things. They will adapt to your payment level. A lot of places for our older population, if you have Medicare, there's a program called Silver Sneakers that will subsidize at least part of your gym memberships in an effort to help people get out and get moving. But even at baseline, there are a few places like Planet Fitness, not Planet Hollywood. That's a different kind of workout. Planet Fitness is they're relatively low cost, fairly inexpensive. They have decent equipment. A lot of places that are very similar. You can find a place like that can fit your needs, but also you can do a lot of this stuff at home. When we're talking about cardiovascular stuff, there are videos on YouTube. There are videos on Amazon. I think there are some videos even on Netflix that can just kind of walk you through. Like I said, this Leslie Sansone, I think she has an official name for her workout series, but it's escaping me at the moment. We've used it a lot, and so we just call her the Leslie videos. We've used her a lot in our house. So, but these are, again, all things you can do to give yourself some ideas on how you can walk and change up the work a little bit so that it stays interesting and doesn't get too boring. So we've talked about some cardio stuff. We talked about warm-ups with stretching and maybe doing some things around your house at a little bit increased pace. Then you kind of get into the conditioning phase, and this is where you're really going to want to be moving at a pretty good clip. A lot of people get concerned about breathlessness, and that's very legitimate. You know, people with chronic lung disease, of course, have breathlessness. Even doing basic, what we call our activities of daily living, cooking, cleaning, brushing your teeth, taking a shower or bath, all that kind of stuff. And if that's getting you breathless, then a lot of people are intimidated by trying to do any kind of workout because they don't like that breathlessness, and it feels bad. And it does. But it's important to remember that even people who are in peak physical shape, when they're trying to challenge their body a little bit and trying to develop that conditioning, they also get out of breath. Being out of breath isn't necessarily in itself a bad thing. It just means that your body is being challenged. And that's why pulmonary rehab is very important, because they can have some other monitoring things to make sure your body isn't over-challenging. When you're on your own, it's okay to still be a little bit short of breath, a little bit breathless, but you do have to be careful that you're not overdoing it. And again, people have different philosophies on this. I like the idea of challenging yourself as much as possible, but you also, again, have to be kind of careful about overdoing it. So one of the things that's commonly used is what's called the Borg scale, or the scale of the rate or level of perceived dyspnea. And this is a thing that we have, and bear with me for a second. The feed that I can see is a little bit delayed. I don't have my usual live feed, so I'm trying to make sure that this is on the screen properly. All right, I think we're doing good there, and I'll get a copy of this more into the group also. But this is a 0 to 10 scale that can kind of list how you perceive your exertion, how you perceive your dyspnea. And this is a pediatric version that I like because sometimes it's hard to just put a number on things. One person's 5 is going to be another person's 7, is going to be another person's 2. And so if you can kind of look at where you feel on the scale, you can kind of see it goes all the way from very low exertion, very easy exercise, all the way up to where you're kind of at the top of the scale and you're going to collapse and you feel like hell and you're just done. When you're trying to do some cardiovascular fitness, and I will see about getting a copy of this into the group. When you're talking about cardiovascular fitness and stuff, you're going to want to try to be in like the 3 to maybe 5 range. A lot of measures say 3 to 4. I think it's probably okay to push it up to 5 in a lot of cases. And again, this is going to vary depending on where you're coming from at baseline. And that's kind of easy to just feeling a strain and then starting to get hard. Again, this is not necessarily something where you're going to be running a marathon and you're going to be sweating and pouring down and the whole like Rocky IV training montage. You don't necessarily need to get to that point, but you do want to challenge yourself a bit, because if you don't challenge yourself, you're not going to be able to build up any of that reserve. And so that's kind of what you want to do in this conditioning phase of stuff, where that's where you're trying to build up, and that's where you're trying to improve your fitness and walk away the pounds. Thank you, Bonnie. I figured somebody out there would know that. But anyway, that's where you're going to do all the improvement and things like that in this conditioning phase. And then once you do about a half hour of that, once you're at the fitness point where you can do a half hour of that, you're also going to want to do a cool down. Much like it's bad to go from 0 to 60 right away, it's also bad to go from 60 to 0. Your body, your mind, all that stuff, your muscles need to take a few minutes to kind of chill out a little bit, literally. And if you look at any kind of training regimen, if you look at any kind of professional athlete, they do the warm-up, they do the conditioning, and then they do this cool down. It can also be stretching. It can also be walking at a slower pace. Maybe you do one extra lap around the block at maybe half the speed that you were going, something like that. What it doesn't mean is stop. Don't sit down, don't take a break, don't catch your breath. You still have to be moving around at a level of exertion that's a little bit less than what you were doing in that conditioning phase. So we've talked, we've talked a little bit about all the cardio stuff and getting around. Of course, that's very important to get your heart moving, get all that stuff going on. One thing that we haven't really talked about a lot, and what actually hasn't even really been studied all that much, is the idea of resistance training in the setting of chronic lung disease. And again, this is where we're starting to build up a lot of our muscles. You can build up that cardiovascular endurance, but if you don't have the muscles to kind of overcome and help you breathe, you're not getting your maximum benefit. And of course, when we talk about resistance training, where a lot of us think about, going to the gym and all the big burly weightlifter guys doing the bench press, or working on the machines there, the big Nautilus machines, and pumping this iron and all this stuff. That's not necessarily what it's about. You could very easily do this stuff at home also. This is a set of 5-pound hand weights. They go down, I think you can get wrist weights that strap onto your wrist that go all the way down to about ½ pound. You can get them in ½ pound increments. You can go and get this stuff at Target, at Walmart, at your local, whatever your discount store of choice is. You can get them off of Amazon. I even went to, I know they can be fairly inexpensive, because I got a pair or a set, I think they were 2½ pound weights, at a store called Five Below, where everything in there is $5 or less. So this stuff is out there and it's fairly cheap. Even if that's a little bit out of range, most people can still go to the grocery store and get a can of something. This is good old refried beans. You may want to go with depending on your particular cardiac needs, you might want to go a little salt or a little fat version of this, but these are really good, especially with a little bit of cheese, a little bit of sour cream, a little bit of salsa. I like to mix it up, make a little paste, some good comfort food that's relatively healthy for you. This is a 2-pound can. A lot of people don't think about this. You can use this as weights. I mean, this curls just about as easily as a formal hand weight would curl. You can get a ½ gallon of milk, or a half-gallon bottle, like a milk bottle. I want to say that the whole gallon weighs about 5 pounds, I believe, a whole gallon of water. So a ½ gallon of water is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 to 3 pounds. Put one of those, I mean, those have a nice convenient handle. You can do lifts with those. You can do curls with those. You can lift them up over your head. There's a really good exercise that I came across while I was doing some research for this called a dowel exercise. And basically it's particularly targeted toward the upper body. Usually you're going to want to use a wooden dowel or curtain rod or something like that again you can get at, usually you can get a place like Walmart, get a place like Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, your home center of choice. If there's any True Value, we still have a good old, we've lost one, but we still have one good old school private hardware store in town. Just a wooden rod, thick enough that it's comfortable to grip, usually probably about an inch or so. Or again, you can use the hand weights. And basically it's just raising the dowel rod up and putting it down. Lifting up and put it down. Very basic stuff that you can do at home with homemade equipment. A lot of people get discouraged because they can't afford the gym, they can't get to the gym, they can't do any of that stuff. You can do all this stuff at home. You can improvise with a lot of the stuff that you have. And a lot of these things are online. The key to adapting into the COPD world is, again, just making sure you're staying within that safe range of perceived exertion. And checking with your doc to make sure, if you have a range of motion problem, maybe if you have like an artificial shoulder or something like that, you're not supposed to go past a certain range, then you're going to want to adapt your exercises appropriately. If you need to be careful because you have an artificial hip or knee, usually we're pretty good about getting back the whole range of motion and all that stuff, but if you do need to be particularly careful, just make sure you're exercising within the realm of safety for your particular condition. Another thing that a lot of people like to do are, we talk about resistance more than we talk about weights now, because there's a lot of different ways to give yourself resistance. There are a lot of these rubber bands or sheets of rubber that come in various tensile strengths that can, they give you resistance too. It's not necessarily about the weight, it's about you forcing your muscle to go against things. You can even do things using your own body mass against it. I can't ever remember if these are isometric exercises or exactly what they're called, but if you get yourself a good wall, which is a little bit hard to do in the office here, a good wall or a table or something like that. I'm going to see if I can look like not too much of a goofball doing this. Lean against it and you can do kind of an incline push-up. And again, this is going to be kind of more of a thing where you're trying to build up that muscle mass a little bit more. Don't be too frustrated if that's something you can't jump into, but these are things that you can do. Again, my goal with this is to try to get you thinking of things that you can do that are cheap, that are accessible, and that you can do on a fairly regular basis around the house. Because again, all exercises can be modified to fit your abilities or limitations. Kathy Howell, thank you very much. That's exactly the point we're trying to get across here. All this stuff is very good for you to do, and all of it can be accomplished fairly easily. It might not be like it is in the textbook, but in my opinion, very little of life is like the textbook. And a lot of this stuff can be adapted to your personal situation. A couple last things to talk about when we're talking about exercises. We talked about making sure you stay in that safe zone of perceived exertion. How do you know when you're going a little bit too far with your exercise? How do you know when you should maybe stop? Couple of key factors. If you have extreme shortness of breath, even after taking any kind of reliever medication or rescue medication, that's a sign right there. The goal of exercise is to build you up, not really tear you down. The goal of this is not to push you way beyond into a realm of dyspnea and shortness of breath and all that stuff where you can't recover. It's to get you challenged to a point where you can start building. So if you go too far and you're not getting any benefit or anything like that, that's time to stop, and next time now you kind of have a better idea of where your limit might be. Along those same lines, if you have a lot of pressure in your arm, chest, neck, head, any of that stuff, those are things to stop and probably get yourself checked out by your nearest medical professional, because those can be some very serious signs of overexertion and overstrain on your heart and your cardiovascular system. but a little bit less. Obviously, maybe if you start to get nauseous, if you start to get lightheaded in particular, that can be a symptom of very low oxygen. If you start having trouble thinking, if you're really getting a fog going on, or you're losing your balance, or things like that more than a baseline, those are all things that tell you need to stop what you're doing and then take it easier next time, so that you don't get into those positions. Again, the point to exercise for this is to build and to moderately challenge, not to tear you down and make everything explode, so that you do your exercise but then you don't do anything for 3 days, because that's counterproductive too. And the last thing is, when we talk about exercise plans, when we talk about nutrition plans and all that stuff, the biggest thing that is going to keep you motivated and keep you successful is being accountable, particularly to yourself. And this can take a lot of different forms. When we talked about nutrition, we talked about using a diary app on your phone or on the computer, or even journaling in your own book. Journaling is a thing that has been very powerful for in my wife's office, in her bariatrics office. It's something I'm starting to bring in and experiment with a little bit in my clinic when we're talking about quitting smoking. We see a lot of those same kind of habits. And it can also be very helpful with exercise and keeping yourself accountable. Make sure that you write in there, I did so many steps today. I did 30 minutes on the elliptical machine. I walked around the block 5 times. And that's important because first of all, you can kind of keep, depending on how data-oriented you are, you can also keep track of your heart rate and your symptoms and all this stuff, and you can keep a very close eye on how well your exercise program is progressing. But it also gives you some extra motivation. A lot of these apps like MyFitnessPal and things like that will tell you, you've logged in for 3 days now. Don't give up. You want to log in and do your thing for 4 days. You start challenging yourself. I've done it this long. I don't want to lose this streak now. I want to keep going. I want to go 5 in a row. I want to walk for 10 days in a row. I want to do this. I want to do that. Keep yourself accountable, whether that's intrinsically, all by yourself in a journal or something like that, whether it's getting some workout buddies, either at home or online. Like I said, I've been hoping that Bonnie's going to keep me a little bit accountable too, and Scott Brewski also picked him up as a friend on Fitbit today. I want to start being more accountable again, especially since I have absolutely no excuse. First of all, I'm the one that's lecturing on this stuff, so I don't want to be the do as I say, not as I do guy. But also, now that springtime is here, my favorite thing to do is go walking outside. We have a pretty nice downtown area here in Kalamazoo. We have some nice, we have a nature center, we have a lot of parks, we have a lot of stuff where we can go out and walk and be in the nice fresh air and all that stuff. So that's what I'm going to be doing again. I got in a very nice habit of that last summer and into the fall, and then kind of fell off a little bit. I'm not a huge gym guy, never was. I would like to be, but I can give you a half dozen excuses, but the bottom line is I did not do that appropriately. I was not holding myself accountable, and I've plateaued a lot. My energy level isn't quite what I would like it to be. My physical fitness level isn't quite what I would like it to be. So I'm right there with you. I need to hold myself accountable so that we can all kind of walk together and walk this walk and all that stuff. Accountability is a very important piece to this going forward, and at the end of the day, you are responsible for your own health. All the doctors, all the respiratory therapists, all the nurses, everybody else, we can give you the tools, and we can help row the boat with you. But at the end of the day, we need you to hold up your end also, for your good, for your family's good, and for the rest of your life. So hopefully these are some good tips that, again, the best thing you can do is go to pulmonary rehab. It's a good workout thing. They also teach you things more about nutrition, more about social stuff, staying engaged with your life. It's a good bonding experience, all that kind of stuff. If that is not available, or if you have graduated from pulmonary rehab, then there's still a lot that you can do on your own. In addition, once you're done with pulmonary rehab, we found that those people who just kind of go back to their baseline level of activity lose all their benefits from pulmonary rehab within about 18 months or so. So while pulmonary rehab is fantastic, it is fairly, for the time being, it is fairly time limited, and it does rely upon you to kind of continue on with that, whether it's through a formal exercise program or whether it's just doing all your stuff. So hopefully I've given you some tools and some ideas that you can bring this stuff to your own life and get into better shape, I guess. All right. So with that, we've done about our half hour here. So let me scroll back a little bit and see what I need to catch up on. Let's see, Bonnie. I found the charger. My wife had a charger at her office, and she brought it home with me. So my Fitbit is charged. I am wearing it now. I do want to get back on the horse with these challenges and stuff like that, and I will be right there with you. I'll take it easy on you tonight because I know you've got that dinner reservation with Right to Breathe. And if anybody is in the New Jersey area, I don't remember exactly what city it is. There's a post about it in the group here. If you do want to support the Right to Breathe organization, they're doing a fantastic job helping get the word out about COPD and trying to raise some money to do advocacy efforts and all that kind of fun stuff. So let's get out there and support them and the incredible work that they are doing right now. Also, oops. Let's get out there and support them. Mute that. So okay, now I can kind of see the comments a little bit better. So I'm going to scroll back here. Appreciate everybody saying hello. Good luck to John going into cardiac rehab today, exercising to breathe easy. That's an excellent attitude to have. And there's Jim. I mentioned he's a firm believer in exercise. Believe me when I tell you, the older you get, the faster you lose muscle tone, the harder it is to get it back. That's absolutely true. And there's a lot of stuff that works hand in hand in that. You know, we tend to talk about, especially when in the setting of COPD, if we talk about exercise and nutrition, a lot of times we talk about them in isolation. And we really shouldn't, because you need to exercise to get all this stuff, but you also need to eat the proper fuel, consume the proper fuel, to give yourself the building blocks so that you can, so that exercise is effective. And again, that usually means a good amount of protein, making sure you're taking in the right protein, keeping your carbs, especially your simple sugars, fairly low. Your refined sugars, your simple sugars, you know, your candies, your soda pop, your all that kind of fun stuff, keeping that stuff fairly low. And then having enough fat so that you can kind of fill in the blanks there. Again, that's going to depend on your own particular metabolism and all that. I'll refer you back to some good discussions we had last week in that live. Of course, we can do some follow-up questions later on. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah was a former co-worker of mine back in the day at an old hospital. I know it's been on a weight loss journey of her own. I appreciate the support there. It's been tough work. I've learned a lot about exercise and nutrition, especially over the last year as I've been trying to go through the journey myself and trying to adapt what I've learned for my situation into the chronic lung disease world, because I think it's something that we tend to under-discuss. And we don't put enough importance on it as it is. So Rebecca, let's see. Rebecca, I wish we had more physicians who are going to be a little bit more aggressive with exercise and stuff too. It's difficult in our. Again, I know we've got some UK people on board and some other international members. In the U.S., our society weirdly doesn't place much emphasis on exercise. You know, we think it's very important to have this buff physique, and looks are very important and all that, and we tend to be kind of superficial, but we always look for the quick fix, and we don't look for a lot of exercise, and we don't talk about good nutrition and all that stuff. And unfortunately, that applies to clinicians too. I wish more docs were talking about information like this, primary care, pulmonology, everybody, because people do get afraid to exercise. And it can be risky at times. What Rebecca's talking about here is a big, where spots in your lungs get kind of big, the alveoli kind of blend together. It's called a bleb. it's kind of basically like a big air sac in your lungs, and they tend to be kind of fragile, and they can tend to rupture pretty easily too. And then that leads into a whole other realm of issues with what's called a pneumothorax or a collapsed lung. You can have pressure out there, and sometimes you need to get a chest tube and all that stuff. So there are things that, and this is again where I say you got to be careful and talk with your doc about any other conditions that are going on with your life before you get into this exercise. Because sometimes you need to vary the level of intensity and that sort of thing. And the earlier you do get involved in something like pulmonary rehab or start on these exercise programs, the easier it is to preserve what lung function you have. We've talked a lot about this thing called the Fletcher-Peto curve as it relates to smoking, but it's also fairly applicable when it comes to exercise and stuff too. Everybody tends to lose a little bit of their lung function as they get older, but you can even bend that curve a little bit when you're talking about doing exercise and things like that. If nothing else, you can certainly influence your symptom burden and things like that, because you can kind of compensate for some of that lung function that you've lost. And again, much like with smoking, it's never too late, but the sooner the better, because you do tend to lose this stuff over time, and it's a lot easier to maintain than it is to try to build back. Excellent. I appreciate, Rebecca, you sharing all that stuff. Keep going on with the hand weights. I'm climbing 2 flights of stairs to the office every day, very slow, but the important thing is slow and steady will win you the race. You're keeping at it, and you're doing a great job with that, so thank you for sharing, and keep that up. Love to have something we can save to our computer and follow along with or print out for reference. With low O2 levels, memory is not so good at times. That's very true. I am working on a few things like that. There are some resources online that can talk about some of this stuff. I'm working on trying to pull some of them together and highlight some of the things that I think are most important, and go from there. Rose, hopefully the static hasn't been too bad. Don't want to go to the public fitness places because I don't want to pick up germs. That's a very, very, very valid concern for a lot of people with potentially compromised immune systems, which a lot of people with chronic lung disease have, of course, and that is a risk. And that's, again, why it's important to be able to know how to do some of this stuff at home, especially if you don't have access to the same kind of fitness equipment at home as you might in the gym. Barring that, you can do a few simple things. Surgical masks, they can increase your breathing the resistance of breathing sometimes and make it a little bit more challenging for you, but they are a potential option. And also good hand washing and keeping some sandy wipes or Clorox wipes or whatever. Most gyms have those on hand, but you can also carry your own around and give the equipment a good wipe before you get on it and then after you're done, so that not everybody else is getting all that stuff either. So let's see, half mile on the treadmill daily, get shorter breath at times walking across the room. That's kind of one of the mysteries about COPD too, and that's why sometimes the workout stuff isn't always as easy as it is, because it is kind of unnatural. When you're walking, you're not necessarily doing 5 miles in a row or something like that. Sometimes we need to work on these activities of daily living, and that's where some of the weight resistance comes in, or the resistance training, where you're building up the muscles that you need for doing those activities of daily living. When you're hanging clothes, or when you're showering and your arms are up here and all that kind of stuff. Or I know somebody who talks about, they can golf, they can do all that stuff. You've built those muscles to do those things, but that doesn't necessarily transfer over into the other things you need to do. So it's important to do a lot of different kind of training and a lot of building up the muscles in different areas, your arms, your legs, all kinds of different areas. Getting regenerated, excited about exercise again, excellent. 8-pound weights, very good, moving up. And again, this is moving up from simple weights to harder weights. And the effort is certainly worth the reward, or the reward is worth the effort, depending on how you want to look at it. So again, going for that 30 minutes nonstop to get that good exercise going, and all that stuff. Love pulmonary rehab. See others who have had negative experience, little coaching and no classes. Is there anything on the horizon to standardize pulmonary rehabilitation programs? The best thing you can do right now is look for a program that is accredited by the American Association for Cardiovascular and Pulmonary Rehab, or the AAC VPR. They do have a certification program that rehab programs have to meet certain standards, educational standards, outcome standards, that sort of thing. As far as standardizing stuff, there's not really a standard curriculum because a lot of it is varies around the country and varies in philosophy and all that. We haven't done a lot of research to find out what the best practices are. But for right now, look for that seal of approval from the AAC VPR. That's your best bet. Walking, yeah, the winter sucks for exercise, pardon my bluntness, but it's just not great. Especially, like I said, I'm not a real gym person. I like to be. We've got memberships, but we just... pretty much bedridden from November to February, seeing the doctor weekly, now rebuilding. Approximately how long does it take for body or muscle to decondition? I notice I'm coming back quicker this time. A lot of variables there, age, fitness level, all that kind of stuff. Your body will start deconditioning almost immediately, which is why it's important to keep up that chronic exercise and keep that good program going. When you have underlying fitness, you do tend to bounce back a little bit more, so hopefully your previous experience with pulmonary rehab Well, maybe I'm back, maybe I'm not. I'm going to talk for a minute anyway. Do want to emphasize the importance of personal breathing. As Kim mentioned, that is a very important thing when you do get some shortness of breath while you're exercising, all that kind of stuff. Talking about bouncing back, your body will start losing muscle mass and stuff almost immediately. That's why it's important to continue on with exercise programs. As far as and the underlying level of fitness that you might have from pulmonary rehab or something like that will help you bounce back faster. But you will lose almost immediately. So That's why it's important to keep things going. Back or not, I think I am trying to say something. At any rate, I think we're going to wrap this one up for today because I don't even know what's going on now with Facebook. So hopefully we'll see you guys next week, and hopefully we can have a little bit easier session. The tech issues, I don't know. I don't know. Gremlins, whatever you want to call it. But the next week's going to be kind of interesting because Wednesday also starts our Michigan Society for Respiratory Care annual conference. I hope to have a few live bits here and there from that. I'm going to be doing a presentation about what we're doing with the clinic. I'm going to see maybe if it's okay if I can broadcast that. We can get some good information out there for that. And otherwise, we're going to check out some other things in the respiratory world. We will have our normally scheduled session right around noon next Wednesday, and hopefully some other stuff on top of that. So hope everybody has a good week. We'll see you next time. And of course, if you have any questions or anything like that, join us in COPD Navigator on Facebook, and feel free to post away. Have a great afternoon, everybody.